Hey everybody, it's Rob. I am still learning to use my phone as a video camera and how to set it up and do things, and I don't know, we'll see how it goes again. But what I'm doing is I wanted to stop here for a minute. It is a nasty, gnarly, yucky, windy, blowing, stay in the office and do some paperwork kind of day. So that's kind of what I'm concentrating on more than anything else. If I'm lucky, I won't get called out and have to climb up 100 feet in the air to go fix something for somebody. I hope everything's put together good enough I don't have to do that. This is not a great day to do it. Fortunately, it's not real cold outside, maybe 45 degrees, something like that. But with the wind blowing 30 and 40 miles an hour, it just gets kind of yucky all the way around. What this is, and I should have done this before I started that, pardon me while I turn. I've got a little Spam cooking here on the wood stove. Not really Spam, it's generic Spam. It's pressed luncheon loaf or something, I can't remember. It's from the dollar store, so it's cheaper and about as good. But it is, that's right, grab that hot handle. I've got a hot pad here somewhere so I don't have to do that. There we go. See if y'all can see that frying and sizzling up real nice. It smells good too. But another turn on that guy. It'll be sizzling nicely. But a guy named SurvivorMetalMan, I can still hold my coffee cup, thankfully. Woo! That is almost Wes S hot right there, which is too hot for me. SurvivorMetalMan up in the wilds of Oklahoma somewhere did a video the other day that just caught my fancy about his wood stove. I don't know if y'all know it or not. A lot of you probably do, some of you probably don't. I love wood stoves. I have a love affair with wood stoves going back to 1980, 79, somewhere right. In fact, longer than that, but 1980 was when I installed my first wood stove back in a little house I was living in town that didn't have any other source of heat. And so having to turn on the little, I guess it did. It had a little bathroom heater, one of those little freestanding natural gas stoves that you could use to heat up. And it helped, but it didn't do the job. And then I had my cook stove in the kitchen. But on a cold day, especially if the wind was blowing in a house that wasn't insulated and had single pane windows all over it, it didn't do a lot to stay warm in there. So I installed a little cheap wood stove that I got from JCPenney, much like this one here. In fact, the wood stove I got, you can still pick up from Harbor Freight, the wood stove I had back then. You can still pick up at Harbor Freight for like 150 bucks. It's just a little old cheap box stove with removable burner plates and an adjustable damper in the front. And you can even swivel the whole top of it out of the way to get down in it if you need to. But that little dude kept my house warm. And I flat fell in love with him. When I was a little kid, we would go stay in Central Texas sometimes with my Uncle Buddy. And I can remember he had a potbelly stove that sat in the middle of their common room. And they'd take it out in the summertime, put it back in the wintertime, and they'd get that thing roaring hot. And he and I would go out early in the morning, and we'd milk the cow, and then come back in and sit around that stove to get warm again. And he would drink coffee, and my Aunt Lubell would make hot chocolate, or I can't even remember now what she would make, but it was wonderful. And I just have really great memories of sitting around that stove as a little kid. But SurvivorMetalMan had a stove similar to this in a similar setup as this, and so I just thought I'd talk about it for a minute. He says he got his 7 years ago and was real happy that it was working good. Well, 7 years is a good start. I got this particular stove, and this is not a high dollar expensive stove, especially the way I got it. The backstory on that is I was living in my shack up in the mountains in Breckenridge, Colorado, and I needed a heater because it'd get down to minus 20, 30, and 40 up there, and that little propane cook stove I had turned out not to be the best way to heat that stove, especially since one night it got so cold that the propane quit flowing fast enough to keep the fire lit, but it kept flowing a little bit of propane. Now, I woke up having some pretty bizarre dreams and then realized what was going on, and I was afraid to get out of bed. It was about probably 20 degrees inside my little shack that night. My little shack was a camper trailer that I had built an 8x12 room on to do my office work. It was where I very first built my first real business out of. I had fond memories of that place. But I was afraid to get out of bed. I knew if I made a spark, it was going to blow the whole place sky high. So I had to edge out of bed real slow in my drawers and walk over to the door very carefully and open the door without making a static spark, and then let the whole place air out for about a half hour while I stood out in the snow about froze to death. Now, I did take a jacket out there and a pair of Sorels that I had by the front door, so at least it wasn't as bad as it could have been. But I learned my lesson after that. I realized I needed to get a wood stove, and I saw an ad in the paper, somebody that had a wood stove for sale. So I went to go see them, and they had this real cool Orley stove, and they wanted $100 for it. It was worth way more than $100, but they wanted to sell it and get rid of it. And I said that'd be great. While I was there, next to it was this wood stove and another little wood stove. And I said, what about those guys? They said, what about those guys? I said, they look like pretty good stoves too. They said, do you want them? I said, yeah. They said, okay, take them. I said, how much? They said, no, take them. So for that $100, I got the Orley, the good stove. It's at my little brother's house. I got another little wood stove that is not very big, but it's an incredible heater, and it's sitting out in my barn right now. And I got this guy right here. And that was in about 1992, maybe, right in there somewhere. So I've been using this stove here going on 30 years now. This was my primary heater inside that place. And it's a great little stove. It says Scandia, but I'm pretty sure it's a little made in Taiwan stove that, you know, just a little cheap cast iron stove that works real good. It burns a good fire. My handle broke at one time, as well as one of the hinges. I might get a little rough with stuff sometimes, but it's got an adjustable damper on the front here that you can open up. I put a damper on the stovepipe up here. I'm not sure if it shows high enough there, but so I can kind of control it, a little temperature gauge, so I don't get it too hot. Although if you get a wood stove too hot, you can usually smell it and know it's time to shut it down. SurvivorMetalMan had his set in a corner just like this one. The one thing different that he did, though, is he didn't have any heat shielding up, and I guess that works okay for him. Sheetrock is pretty good, you know, for not catching on fire or doing whatever. But I have had times when the walls would just get, too hot to touch, and that worries me. So I put up basically just a little bit of redneck heat shielding. It's just some tin that I cut some spacers out of some little 1/2-inch conduit, about that long, just enough to put an airspace between the tin and the wall. And I learned this with that wood stove I had back in 1980. In fact, that one, my heat shielding there was even more redneck, if that's possible, than this one was, because it was just a piece of tin nailed to a couple of 1-bys that sat on the wall behind it just to reflect the heat off. And I learned right away that it just doesn't take very much to reflect that heat away, or to wick it away, I guess would be the right word. That tin would be so hot you couldn't touch it, but right behind it, where the wall was, it was nice and cool. So I realized that was going to work. And then to redneck things even further, to protect the end of my wood box and the side of our entertainment center here, I just got aluminum foil hanging there. I can't believe Happy Hair has not made me do something different. But for the most part, you can't really see it real well, so it doesn't stand out. And I think she realizes the wheels of progress turn a little bit slow around here sometimes, so she's good about that. But you can see around the stove, I've got all the different stuff I need. You know, firewood. I've got a little hatchet and a little chopping block here that I can split up some kindling. The basic fire poker. I've got a shovel. I got a pair of tongs back there. I got my ash buckets over here. If you don't know this, by the way, this is one of those things you think everybody knows, and it turns out not everybody knows it. I used to manage some places up there in Colorado, and people would once in a while clean out their fireplaces into a paper sack and then set that paper sack out on their wooden deck, and then later be absolutely shocked that their deck was on fire. You wouldn't think that that would be a thing. Or they'd go throw it in the dumpster, and then you got flames shooting about 30 feet out of the dumpster later too, and hoping you don't catch the trees on fire. I don't know. Some people just, it doesn't occur to them, I guess. I don't hold it against them. You know, riding a bicycle is pretty easy, but until you've done it a couple of times, it's kind of hard. So we've got the ash buckets there, all that. I've also got a couple of tin cans, pardon, a couple of tin cans under there, coffee cans, that I put things like little rocks and that sort of stuff that shows up in wood. If we burn nails, when I clean out the ashes, if I can pick the nails out first, I can throw them in there. Usually I have to put the wood ashes out in my garden or around trees or different places like that, so they can kind of go back into the dirt again. And it works out real well. I've got various pans. I've got a little set of bellows up there. They don't work real good. What I usually use instead of those, that's nice and warm, is this guy here. Now, I did a video where I made this dude right here, one like it, and a lot of people don't know what it is. And it may not be able to see, but this is for blowing the fire. If you got a fire that's not going good, if you got something you can blow the fire with, once the fire's already going, it doesn't accomplish very much doing that. But if you're just getting a fire going, if all you've got is some coals that you're trying to start a fire with, or a little bit of kindling in there that's not burning real fast, I gotta shut that, that's hot. Something like this is great, and it's really easy to make. Close that damper back down. Get another drink of mine. I'm gonna have to set that somewhere else, because that's hot, pardon me. Holy cow, yep. In fact, I'm going to set it somewhere even cooler because I got it too hot. Wes would be happy with it. It's funny, I can eat hot peppers and things like that, but hot liquids and foods, not so much me. Anyway, getting way off track. The whole thing here, like I say, just wanted to share with you about a wood stove. I love wood stoves. I really do. In fact, Sarah Cornelius, for those of you who know her as that, her favorite book as a small child, I used to read to my, be careful, I used to read to my girls all the time when they were little. Always read, always read. We read tons of books, and of course they each had their favorite books. Sarah's favorite book was a book called Milk and Cookies, and it was about a bear family, I guess, and the baby bear woke up to some sounds one night, and the whole theme of the book was wood stoves. In fact, even the dedication in the book, the front of the book, was dedicated to this dude's uncles who love their wood stoves, and I'm one of those guys that loves their wood stove. I mean, many times when we lived in Colorado, the power would go out, and up there is significant. A lot of people had pellet stoves. Pellet stoves are great heaters until the power goes out, and then there's no electricity to turn that auger or run that fan. But a wood stove here, the power would go out, and we're just happy as clams because we can light some candles and we can burn our wood stove, and if we need to, we can cook on it, and life is still good. It still goes on. Now, living in West Texas, of course, the problem is the wood, because there's just, a lot of people don't believe me when I say there's no trees up here. We use trees as landmarks here in this part of the world, and it's the truth. But there's plenty of scrap lumber, and there's plenty of fools here that don't like trees, and so they chop them down, and it's pretty easy to go collect the wood. In fact, if I couldn't find anything else, no construction sites or anything, I could go out to our local landfill, the dump ground, and there's tons of trees that people have carried out there that can be chopped up and made into firewood and brought back here. So firewood is just not ever a problem, oddly enough. But even still, I like to go off down country and bring back cedar wood. Oh, the cedar wood smells so good. I'm not going to dig it out. There's several pieces in there. And it burns real good. A lot of people had asked about the cedar. That was one of my past videos. Maybe this is where you put one of the little banners up there. I don't know if I can do that. I'm learning, okay? Old dogs, new tricks. Anyway, a lot of people had asked about burning cedar. And my little brother found out that if you put some cedar in there that's not seasoned out real good and load your wood stove up with it, light it, shut the door, come back in 20 minutes, it may get a little hotter than it needs to. But I've burned cedar most of my life off and on and never had any problems with it. So there we go for that. Anyway, that's it. That went a lot longer than it probably needed to, but I love wood stoves and I love cooking, and it's about lunchtime. So I'm going to shut this guy down, and I'm going to wish all of y'all a good day, and thanks for being here. Cheers.